Okay, good morning everybody, and welcome to this session on why students should get involved in international networks, or why Utopia is no utopia without students. In other words, this session focuses on student perspectives in networks. I think that's important to point out already from the start. My name is Hans Abelius, and I'm the International Director at the University of Gothenburg. My role is to get this conversation started, so to speak, between our very interesting panelists who soon will be given the floor. I'm just going to give some short context to the session before we start off. As you know, the session is a part of EUTOPIA Week, and the session is sort of brought to you by work package number 6 within the project, which of course doesn't really mean anything for a lot of you, but still it's important to say that it's a vital part of the EUTOPIA Alliance, and more importantly also to show that the EUTOPIA Alliance is more than Europe and open to the world, so to speak. So even though it's a European project, we are very anxious, of course, to have the sort of global perspective with us, both when it comes to student engagement and research and so further on. And to show this, of course, we have a number of global partners, namely Stellenbosch University in South Africa, Kyung Pok National University in South Korea, Monash University in Australia, and the International University of Rabat in Morocco. So we have the sort of width of partners also outside Europe. And of course, we probably will be happy to have others join us in the near future. So that's also a good thing to have in mind when we talk about the session today. So a bit about networks then, and a lot of you listening in, of course, are familiar with networks and why universities are engaged in networks and so on. But just to give you a glimpse, I mean, universities are engaged in a whole lot of different networks, different sorts, different settings, and I should say also in growing numbers. And these networks, they fill different purposes. It could be of all different sorts. It could be benchmarking, different areas of the academics, research, education, cooperation, and so on. It could also be finding partners for projects, maybe, both in research and education. Some of the networks are also very active when it comes to lobbying, how to sort of change the formalities of the sector and so, both in Europe, of course, and in the world, so to speak. Policy making could also be an important part of a network, combining the strength of different universities. But it can also be very practical things like arranging summer school for students in a cooperative way or on a common basis. And we will, of course, have a broad perspective on this. Look at different networks, but have all international networks in the frame of mind when we have this session today. But of course, it's also a bit of a focus on Utopia and what sort of possibilities that are provided within the Utopia network. And just to give you a short notion of what the possibilities within the Utopia network could be, we have, for example, for students, different open innovation challenges. We have a specific or special Utopia Certificate of Internationalization. That's like a logbook book for students to put down what sort of international engagement they have done during their courses and their education. And we also have co-supervised activities between our universities, students coming from different universities with a special project, and then have a supervisor and the co-supervisor at a different partner within the network. So those are just, a couple of things that might interest you and have us in the frame of mind what we are talking about. There's also possibilities for students within Utopia to engage in different student-driven activities. One is the Be Utopian Conference, which will happen next week, which is totally student-driven. So that's also something interesting, of course, for students. So that's just some short introductory remarks about networks. And just before I let the panelists in, just some short things about housekeeping notes. Of course, hopefully a lot of people are listening in on this conversation with this brilliant panel. Even though we cannot see each other, we of course are longing for interaction of different sorts. So please, if you have any questions during the session, and to the panelists, please post them in the Q&A function found at the bottom of your Zoom screen. That would be wonderful, and we try to keep track of the questions and try to fit them into the conversation as it goes along. So that was pretty much the introduction notes and the housekeeping notes. But now to our panel. It consists of 6 people today. And I just want to already thank you for your willingness to take part of the session. Brilliant, of course, and we have a wide variety of experiences and also tendencies from all different parts of the world, not all, but some, I should say. So I should ask you now to maybe introduce yourself briefly. What's your current position and where you're coming from, so to speak. But also, if it would be possible for you to say something on your view of student involvement in international networks, maybe both during the studies and beyond. And I know that you have different sort of background and different competencies. Of course, you can trickle with that in the way you want to. And as it's in this digital world, I will be sort of the point out who will start speaking, which also will help our technicians. So I would give the floor first to Luke Mepham. So please, Luke, give us the things that I talked about.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Hans. So my name is Luke Mepham. I'm currently president of University of Warwick Students' Union and also one of the vice presidents on the EUTOPIA Student Council. So I've actually only got a few more months left in this role and then we'll be leaving Warwick, but hope to kind of stay involved in the EUTOPIA network going forwards. It's something that's really, really exciting. And I think it's absolutely key for students to keep involved in and to get involved in kind of international networks throughout their time at university. Not only does it kind of build your CV and kind of make you a lot more attractive to employers, I suppose, as kind of business is becoming more and more global, but also just kind of opens up your mind to loads and loads of different cultures, loads of different ways of doing things, and also just making friends that are abroad, friends from different cultures, kind of opening your mind. I think those are kind of the benefits that I prefer to focus on, that and that I'm more excited about, and I'm more excited about by kind of networks like EUTOPIA. And so I think there are a whole wealth of benefits for students. I'm sure we'll touch on them more today, but I think those are kind of the key ones for me and why I'm really, really excited to be involved in the project.
Okay, thank you so much, Luke. And then I'll give the floor to Haileselassie Medhin, who is also an alumni from the University of Gothenburg. So thankful that you can join us today. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Hans. Really great to join this panel, and thank you for inviting me. My name is Heidi Slashimadan. I lead strategy and partnerships for the World Resource Institute for our Africa work. WRI is a think tank working on the environment and development space. We originally sprang from the US, but we have presence now in globally, including in Africa. Just to add to what Luke said on the value of international networks for students, maybe 2 things. First, it's fundamentally about who you talk to and who you meet and the students that you network with, their perspectives. So it's about people, so that it's very important to stress. Of course, what you learn and the courses that you might take together or the innovations that you might get in other places are important, but I think focusing on the people that you meet and learning their perspectives about the world is going to be crucial. because that's really what makes you kind of think about different things that are important for your future. The second point that I want to mention is, look for the second layer of the network, which is, what network does the university have? The one that for example, in EUTOPIA, there's, I think, 6 universities, but what are the networks that they have? And I would like to stress here the value of networks with the Global South. For example, if you take Africa, 4 in 10 people in 2000 will be Africans. African countries are experimenting with new kind of development that we hope will fit what we want to see in terms of sustainability and human well-being. So already kind of getting linked to that discussion, thinking about how the world will look in 20, 30 years and being part of that will be crucial. So I would really encourage for students in EUTOPIA to look for what kind of networks the member universities have to this big space in the Global South, and especially in Africa. So thank you.
Thank you so much for those introductory words. And next we turn to Eloi Papiol from Barcelona. So please.
Hi, good morning, everyone. So I'm a University Pompeu Fabra alum, class of 2011. So it's been a while since I left university for good as a student, I would say. Although we'll probably get back to that as to when you stop being a student and when you start being a professional, if there is such a transition at all. And I graduated in law, and I took my 4th year. I went on Erasmus to the UK and spent a year at Oxford University. And thereafter, I started working at Uria Menedez, which is a law firm with many offices, not only in Spain, but throughout the world. And that's where I've worked ever since. So it's been a good 10 years of hard working as a lawyer. And I also took a gap year to pursue a master's in law in the States. So I've had a bit of an international experience, and I would just say 3 things, and obviously later on we'll have the opportunity to discuss this further as to why international networks are relevant. First thing I would say is that probably we should try to understand and get a sense of what international network means. Facebook, after all, is an international network, and I don't think that this is what we have in mind when we're trying to connect to other people. We want to have meaningful relationships to other people around the world, and especially if they in a way relate to what we are studying, to our path of learning. That makes it all the way more meaningful. Second, I would like to say that when it comes to finding a job, and most of you who are watching us from home or from universities will try to land a job in the coming months or years, it definitely stands out in your CV that you've had international experiences, that you have worked alongside colleagues from other countries, because in a way this reflects on how valuable a professional you would be. It is no surprise, and with this I'm entering the third point I wanted to make, that jobs are currently becoming more international. And I of course can speak of my personal experience. The area of law has typically and traditionally very local based, and lawyers were traditionally servants of the local law, and here that would be Spanish law and Catalan law. And in recent years, and owing to the growth of many companies and internationalization of projects and international investment, there is an increasing need of lawyers in other countries in the world. So having had the opportunity during your time as a student to connect to other people, to create this sort of meaningful, substantial international network will definitely help along the way, not only in your CV, but also at a later stage, once you're already a professional and you want to pursue a career in any area of knowledge, which will almost inevitably involve working with other people from other countries and other ways of thinking.
Thank you so much. And then we'll, of course, proceed quickly to our next panelist, which would be Carmen Mazijn from Brussels. So please, Carmen.
Hello, good morning. Also very happy to be here. So I'm Carmen. I'm a PhD student at the VUB, where I work on an interdisciplinary research project on the fairness of AI. But as a student, I had the opportunity to go on exchange to Spain, where I learned way more than a new language or where to find the best tapas. So afterwards, when I got home, I really wanted that other people could also experience what I had experienced in Spain. So I joined the student organization, the Erasmus Student Network, through which I welcomed and supported incoming international students in Brussels. And this volunteering position brought me all around Europe and ignited my passion of educational and internationalization policies. And it also led to my involvement in EUTOPIA. So that's why I'm here right now. And to summarize my point of view of why it's relevant for students to have international experiences, but also the other way around, for students to be involved in the development of these international experiences, is that through them you learn about your own worldview. By meeting other people who have different worldviews, you learn how you look at the world and what your framework is. And I believe that's very important.
Thank you so much, Carmen. And then finally, but not least, of course, Ajda Hedžet from the University of Ljubljana. So please.
Hello, I apologize for my late entry. I had some technical difficulties. I hope you can still hear me well enough. My name is Ajda. I'm a PhD student at University of Ljubljana, as well as the researcher at the Center for International Relations. So I study international relations. I also did a few exchanges in between my undergrad and master studies, as well as summer school. So I do have some experiences with internalization. That is an important aspect of EUTOPIA connectivity. But nowadays, I've also participated as a mentor in the Open Innovation Challenge of EUTOPIA that just took place, the first stages of it at least. So maybe I can also speak a bit about that aspect later when we get to it. But I wanted to point out an importance of EUTOPIA, which is, in my perspective, maybe the co-creation element. Because I think students nowadays have a lot of power and a lot of knowledge, and they have a really wide view of society that sometimes is not fully taken into account. So I think EUTOPIA, maybe in connection to the role of students, actually enables new opportunities for students where they can participate in creation of the project. They're not just included in them. So through creation of projects that are, actually catering the needs of young people, we also get solutions to problems that we deal with nowadays often, like sustainability, and then that enables also the connection of global partners such as research institutions as well as companies on the market, and that leads us to actual solutions to the issues we so often speak about but don't really know how to properly address. Maybe for the start, that's from my side. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So now has everybody have had the opportunity to make some introductory notes. And my role in this conversation is not that much being of a moderator, more of I was the introductory speaker, of course, but still. So would anybody of you like to start off with asking some of your panelist colleagues a question? So that would be a good way of starting the conversation, I think. So just go ahead. Carmen, you looks like you are interested in asking a question or saying something.
Yes, definitely. But the question I had in mind is more about like afterwards, after when the students already had their experiences. So I don't know if you want to start like during the studies, or I can just ask my question. Okay, so It's mostly a question to our two alumni we have here, who both have quite an international background as well. I mean, we have EUTOPIA as an amazing project for our students, and they will get international experiences through them. But how can they then afterwards sell that they have these experiences on the job market, these skills and such? So I was wondering about that.
So I guess that's a question either for Haile or Papiol. Oh, Eloi, sorry.
Eloi.
Sorry.
So my thoughts on that, and I think that's a very good question, Carmen. I was reading not so long ago that at least University Pompeu Fabra is currently devising ways of broadening students' CVs. So typically, what we took a look at when we reviewed CVs, and especially not only in the academic sector, but also companies that wanted to hire people, they took a look at the marks, at the grades that you got in your academic time, and what I'm saying is that universities are not trying to also place the focus on other things that you've done throughout your academic endeavors, and having had international experiences, having volunteered to organize conferences, to create more networks, to foster this already existing institutional support that we have of a number of elite universities that are the members of the EUTOPIA network. That is something that will ultimately reflect in your CV. And I speak of my personal experience. There's many applicants for a job position, and increasingly the grades that applicants have tend to be better and better. And by that, I'm not implying that the educational standards and the demands of lecturers are being downgraded, so to speak. But what I'm saying is that there is a strong push in the academic sector, and we always have better candidates, better prepared. But not always do they have this international feature on their CVs. And that's something that maybe some of you have come across and you've thought of when you were trying to decide whether or not to go on Erasmus or to go for international experience. Is this worth it? Will I be risking getting lower grades because I'll be spending a year in another university? And obviously this does not apply to English native speakers or native speakers of the language of the the university where you go on Erasmus, but you risk getting lower grades because you're not so in command of the language, and you somehow place less emphasis and focus on what you were doing in your home university. Is this relevant at all? Well, of course it is relevant, and you always need to stay on top of everything if you want to be a good candidate for job positions. But increasingly, companies are placing more emphasis on what you've done rather than the grades you get in your career. And I'm not sure how you all think, how you feel about this based on the experience you had, and maybe Haile, you want to comment on that. But that's the experience I've had so far, and candidates that file CVs in at Uria, among others, we tend to regard very strongly what type of person that candidate is, rather than what the grades say about how good they are in the history of Spanish law or commercial law, which are skills that ultimately they will learn already at the firm.
All right, I fully agree with what Eloi said, and this is a great question, really. How do you signal the value of this? We know that this international experience is valuable, but how do you signal it? I think one way to think about it is to show that you were intentional about it. You know, what did you achieve in terms of your international exchange as a student, and interactions that you've had in the places that you've been. As linked to, for example, the jobs that you applied, a credible way of signaling that you had some intention with it will be important. Eventually, I think at least employers that are international, like the organization that I work for, they will be very interested to know how can you navigate the complexity of the world, the diversities that you will experience in culture, in ways of thinking. So just knowledge and skills as they are necessary, but they will not be the sufficient conditions of a success to deliver change, the kind of change that the organizations want to do. And that layer of being effective in new environments, we require some skills, some understanding of some cultural intelligence kind of skills that you could develop as a student. So reflecting what you learned in a very credible way, in a very open way in your exchanges might help, depending on the context of the jobs that you are applying. So as it is, it's extremely valuable, but if you are intentional and if you could reflect on it, it will be even more valuable. What did it show you in terms of what could you learn about the world? What things that you, what did you learn about yourself in terms of your understanding of issues and the complexity of the world? I think that people are increasingly sort of keeping a keen eye on that when they employ. So if you, for example, if you were to apply at WRI for a position in Uganda as an expert, that's very relevant to us. Maybe we're less likely to hear how much you could change Uganda, how much the skills that you have, but more so on your awareness that you'll face a lot of challenges in a new environment, but you know how sort of to navigate through adapting your skills with a new environment because you have had this and this experience of connecting within the international network. So this really linked to my point earlier about focusing on the people that you meet in these international networks. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Does anyone of Carmen or Ajda or Luke maybe comment on the things that are being said? Luke looks like
you haven't come in. Yeah, I mean, I'm really interested in your perspectives from obviously from the perspective of actually being in the working world. It's something that kind of I've experienced this year, kind of throughout job applications and stuff for whatever's next after this role, and employers do seem very, very keen to talk about kind of Utopia and to talk about any kind of international networks that have kind of been utilised and that you've been part of while you've been at university. So it's great that we're kind of offering as much of that to students as possible. And I think kind of being involvement with international networks is something that maybe students from UK university that I feel are a little bit behind in. I think we've always kind of been quite detached from kind of our European neighbours in terms of the amount of students that do kind of exercise mobility from the university. And I'm from a maths background. Barely anybody on my course would go and do a year abroad. It would almost be unheard of. And I think that's something that kind of Utopia can help to change, and we should really, really be working to change and to kind of just make it the norm a lot more. And obviously kind of with Brexit, that's going to be a challenge. So kind of hopefully things like Utopia will allow us to kind of keep expanding and to keep allowing students to get that bit of mobility, that year abroad, or if that fails, to be able to kind of just interact with students from elsewhere in the world, whether that's Europe or the global south or kind of anywhere else in the world. So I think it is absolutely crucial, and I do feel like from a UK perspective, we've got quite a lot. There's quite a lot of progress to be made, and kind of quite a big, I suppose, culture shift for UK students to get them involved in international networks a lot more.
Ajda, would you like to comment?
Yes, please. Sorry. I just maybe wanted to connect a bit to what Luke just said, because coming from the smallest state out of the participants, Slovenia, because we're so small, we're sort of forced into always thinking about the internalization or cooperations in bigger teams, because just, fitting or making products even for 2 million people, which is the population of Slovenia, it doesn't really make for a sustainable model of business or anything. So I think employers are quite aware of what the additional value of having an international experience on your CV, one or more of them, actually means for them. Because just the way I think bigger businesses nowadays are forced to work on the international market is the communicational element, and being aware of the differences was also trying to integrate them into your everything from communication to teamwork to brainstorming sessions that you have. I think that's the added value of it all, and that's like what employers are increasingly becoming aware international networks such as EUTOPIA give you. So I think it's also that's why it's also really important that there is a visibility element that universities work on, where companies are also aware of the projects EUTOPIA is developing, so that already in this stage where we are being included in the project, companies are also aware of this and they're keeping an open eye to it. This is a short.
Thank you. Very interesting, of course, with the sort of the outreach component of the sort of network part also. It's just not just about the university, it's also about the sort of surrounding society, of course. Even though I'm not supposed to have this maybe moderating role, I guess now we talked a bit about the sort of after studies perspective, how to get your sort of involvement, how to show your skills to maybe a future employer on the job market and so on. But of course, also the networks, of course, have an important function during your studies. And I think that maybe, Carmen, if you could say something about the educational model and how that could be implied in this.
Yes. One of the main reasons why students should get involved is because they have a real voice in the projects that we are developing. A lot of projects have already been mentioned also in the introduction by some of you. But EUTOPIA is also about reinventing international education. We have the Erasmus program, and that is great, and I participated in it. But in there, it's an exchange of an individual. You choose university, and then you choose a couple of classes, and you go there and you have your experience. But it's quite an individual process. But now with EUTOPIA, what we're trying to do is to come together and think about how we can provide education together. And in EUTOPIA, we do that through connected learning communities, where students come together and they work on subjects in groups, which are also relevant to their discipline, of course, and connected to the network and to our other partners, not only the academic partners, but also our local partners from all our regions. And that's I think the added value that we have in EUTOPIA compared to the Erasmus program, because in here we're really paying attention to the value of being all together in one classroom and bringing all these perspectives together and working on specific projects. Because if you just go abroad to read a book and pass an exam, you're not going to learn as much as if you are really working together with a group of fellow students and experts on your topic. And this will, of course, result then in contacts and networks that you have with educational and professional people all around Europe.
Thank you. I guess, okay, you gave a very good and brief introduction into the education model within EUTOPIA and the co-creation parts and so on. And of course, that's new to both Eloi and Heidi. But what would that mean if you would sort of interpret it into your sort of world or what you're working with right now, the things that Carmen brought to our attention? If someone would sort of have something to say on that.
Well, I think that for a long time I was a very Erasmus-minded person, and probably the explanation for that is that there was nothing else out there. Well, of course there were private international private student associations. For example, I was a member of ASEC in my student years, and ASEC was ultimately down to seeking internship opportunities for students, and in a way gather around a table, people from different backgrounds, and having this international experience. And I think that EUTOPIA is a step beyond that, because you have the whole institutional architecture underpinning all of this system, and basically it will not longer be something that you do outside of the classroom, which is what I usually regarded the international exposure that you had through student organizations. It was basically other things that you did rather than learning your discipline, but something which is more an integral part of your learning process throughout your career and your degree, and also after you've graduated, and if you pursue further studies, master's degree, a PhD. That goes one step farther from what you're explaining, Carmen, and that's why I think that we will increasingly regard this as more important in a student's profile, especially because there is something solid beneath. It's not a student organization that pops up. They have a student committee. The next year, they don't have the same number of students getting involved, and the level of the degree or number of activities is lower than they had the previous year. But we have something ongoing, something that will continue for a long time. And I would say that from an employer perspective, this is much more than receiving a graduate from a university in Barcelona or in Ljubljana or in Warwick or in any other place of the EUTOPIA network. You could probably say that student has belonged to European or international university with many campuses around the world. And some of these campuses are probably virtual campuses, and probably more so after the COVID-19 pandemic. And that obviously has an added value. And Erasmus is a very one-sided, and I totally agree with you, Carmen, it's a very one-sided experience. You just go to one country, you are the foreigner, and there you are trying to assimilate everything that is involved in that foreign culture, foreign to you, obviously. And perhaps the people that receive you learn a bit less from you than they could if they were foreigners too, and they were surrounded by people from many other countries. So I think there's been a change, maybe up a notch in how to approach this, and this is why I think EUTOPIA is a very strong asset for a student willing to pursue a professional career. How do you feel, Luke, Ajda, and Hailey?
So maybe Luke, do you want to make a comment?
Sorry, it's like a game of chicken here, isn't it? Everyone reaching to unmute and not sure if you're the one to speak. But no, that's really interesting. I completely agree. And I think kind of within EUTOPIA, like that there's, as Carmen kind of touched on this, there's so many opportunities for students to kind of get involved in, I suppose, like the educational side of kind of the EUTOPIA Alliance. But there's also just this kind of a lot of student activities going alongside that, and that's kind of exactly what you're touching on, Eloi, in terms of these are things that you can then talk about, kind of that have really widened your experience of being international, rather than just going abroad and kind of being the foreigner, as I suppose you mentioned. And so just things like kind of the sharing of knowledge on sustainability, which I was touching on earlier. So the EUTOPIA Alliance has kind of the student-led sustainability think tank, for example, and has regular kind of fora similar to this panel, discussing kind of pressing issues and sharing different perspectives from all over Europe. And I think that's the kind of really broadening your knowledge, broadening your horizon stuff that kind of you can gain so much from. And that doesn't even require you to go abroad necessarily, whilst kind of being immersed in the culture and kind of being forced to learn the language and such like is obviously very, very beneficial. We can still do all of this other student activities online, and so hopefully kind of we'll be able to take in the future kind of increased knowledge of how to use Teams and how to kind of use similar technologies, and really be able to expand these opportunities out to even more students. So perhaps those students who, for whatever reason, can't go on a year abroad or can't spend some other time in another country as part of their course, they will still be able to get this international experience through kind of some of these think tanks or other activities, or indeed through a lot of the educational work that Utopia is putting together. So I think there's a very bright future, and hopefully more students will be kind of going down that path, and then we'll be able to really impress employers, I suppose. And then it's kind of like I suppose we were touching on kind of the bar being raised in terms of more and more people getting very good academic records. Then we're going to get to a point where all students have been involved in international projects. Hopefully that'd be excellent. So I guess then kind of how do we expand that? What's next? What's the next differentiating factor kind of within the international space, I suppose? It's very interesting. I'm sure we'll see over the next few years.
Maybe I can add stress the points that Carmen made, which was interesting to me, which is the co-creation part. A lot of work is becoming very collaborative. People are increasingly working together, whether it's research or other processes. For example, if you look at research outputs over sort of the decades, co-authored research is much more now in a significant way than it used to be. So people used to write papers alone. Now they're working together, which is very good, right? And a lot of the work that we do is also become like that. In kind of creating change in the world, which is a space that I think we are as an organization. Convening and engagement and thinking together is also becoming increasingly important, and it will be. And it's also happening not only sort of in physical space, virtual space. So that co-creation and experience in co-creation, especially if content in courses is also part of that, I think that could really give an edge to Utopias to students. I had a question, in terms of how do you see this, this experience, this environment that's created by Utopia that links the 6 universities? How do you see it opening up the gateway to other networks? Is it part of the design, and what kind of support system do you have for students? I see that in the introduction it says like-minded universities. I found that very interesting. I took it, of course, in a very positive way, but how do you also cross to kind of towards the other spaces, maybe not so much like-minded, in a positive way? There's also the difference is also important. So maybe one of you could reflect, or some of you, on how this could be a gateway to the broader world.
So please, would anyone want to elaborate on that question?
I can maybe go to my experiences as being a part of the, I think we called it conversationally local initiative, which was the Open Innovation Challenge, where students worked. I participated as a mentor. So there were 3 different teams of students discovering local issues which had an international dimension. And even in the whole procedure of the discovering of the local and global problem, which was the same in a way, but with a different component, they would speak to, we would try to make them establish connections with different partners on different either continents or in local society, that would give them a wider perspective on the problem that they identify as an important. So maybe that's putting a different viewpoint to the question that you asked, but I think it's also really important already in this aspect, because they were able to perceive that sometimes, like for example, in Slovenia, we deal with aging, which is a rising problem all over the world, aging population. And speaking to companies that are sort of already tackling this issue on the local scale in Slovenian cities, but then also to companies who deal with it different in Japan, for example, for them, because they actually really wanted to address that aspect, how aging is similar issue in China, for example, and in Asian countries especially, because they were interested in those. And then in Slovenian gave them like a new dimension. But I also want to add a bit more on a different aspect of what you asked, and that's maybe that all of the 6 involved institutions already have some partners in different parts of the world. So I think, for example, just because of historical ties of the UK, I've already, as a researcher or a PhD student, I am aware that University of Warwick has some really good connections with research institutions in the field of migration that could be very beneficial for me as a student in terms of being able to do maybe not even research in those countries or like places where those research institutes are already placed, but maybe more in getting the cultural understanding better, the cultural dimension. So I don't come there as the other with only, you know, very limited knowledge, but that I first get that knowledge that I need to do research that fits the needs or like is appropriate to the awareness that we have reached already at this level.
Thank you so much. And just as also like a brief reminder that the EUTOPIA network it's a pretty young network. It's been around for just about 16 or 18 months or something like that. So of course we are still sort of growing and thinking on which are sort of the like-minded university, which is an interesting concept, of course. I understand your question completely. I just want to also to remind the people listening in that it's possible to ask questions in the Q&A, of course. So please send your questions. We have a couple of questions coming in, and I think all that the attendees or panelists can see them. So if you feel eager to grab one of them, please do.
I wanted to ask a question. Sorry, Haley, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay, I probably had the same question you did. Now I wanted to ask a question about skills. That's probably a question more directed to students who belong to the EUTOPIA network and have had the opportunity to participate in those student activities, in this co-creation, say, platform that EUTOPIA makes available to participants. What skills maybe you can work on the basis of specific experiences that you had? What personal and interpersonal skills you'd say that you have developed in those 16 months in EUTOPIA? Would you feel that would be difficult to develop without having a platform like that one? Because I feel that there's many things that come to mind when you think of working alongside other students from other partner universities. That makes you more open-minded. It allows you to address problems in ways that you wouldn't generally do so because you haven't had that empathy of in ways of thinking of other people in other countries. But maybe you can relate to your personal experience in more specific things because I think that will be helpful for students and people who are watching us to get that more experiential glimpse of what you get and what's the outcome of what you did in EUTOPIA.
I mean, I think one of the key ones is, as you say, kind of just exposure to different ways of working. So I think kind of there's nothing, I suppose, too dissimilar from all of the kind of partner universities that I've worked with, but just kind of when I say different ways of working, just the setups of all the different universities, I think it's quite easy to end up in a bit of an echo chamber thinking that every university functions the same as yours. And so I found it really, really interesting kind of looking at different governance structures and just like different ways that things are organized between institutions, even down to the really small points where I turned up an hour late to my first meeting because I was completely confused about time zones, which seems like something really, really arbitrary and really stupid. And it was quite stupid of me. But that's a skill that I've now kind of learned and will take into kind of into the working world a lot more, just checking times. And it's something that I think, again, us being kind of quite isolated in the UK, probably a lot of UK students wouldn't really think about that. And so I think they're kind of like the main skills that I could take away from it. Obviously, there's all of the communication skills and such like, and kind of facilitation skills through kind of being involved in events like this, organization skills, leadership skills, all of those soft skills. But yeah, I think the ones that have really stood out to me are just the kind of awareness of how different people work and how different organizations work. Carmen, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, a lot, but I'll try to keep it short. So these kind of international experiences, they give you international skills, but international skills is an umbrella term. There's a lot under that term. You have the communication skills, the cultural awareness, also the open-mindedness, as Eloi mentioned as well, and then the language skills. But maybe I can give an example of what I learned in the previous months. So as a member of the EUTOPIA Student Council, what we do mostly is focus on policy. It's the beginning of the project. There's still a lot of policies that have to be written. What do we want as a European university? Where do we want to be in 2030, for example? And then we have to discuss. So we have to identify issues and find solutions to these issues. But in this whole process of communicating to each other, you get aware of your own language, like which words you use that suddenly the other people at the table don't understand. And you're like, you don't understand why they don't understand. And then it turns out that you have a different feeling about certain words. So that's cultural awareness, but it's also communication skills, explaining solutions or issues to people who have a different framework and how they work and how they think is very different than explaining it to your siblings who you grew up with and with whom you have a very similar worldview, for example. So that's something that I learned. Communicating very clearly and being aware of what you're trying to say, to really understand first for yourself, what am I trying to say before communicating it.
And I think that probably, Carmen, has some bearing in when you and obviously I'm trying to think how to translate that into say the job market terms, but this probably has a bearing in your way of first presenting yourself, explaining what you do. And I think that you are yourself an evidence. You're exhibit A for that. And second, when working also with people of your own country, you will be more mindful of the fact that not everybody understands or approaches a matter in the same way you do. And this, for example, in the area of law, is a critical thing. Many of you are not lawyers or nor studying to be lawyers, but for example, when we have to draft a contract, there's many parts to it, and it could become a very difficult endeavor for a single person to carry out. Sometimes we have to, but if possible, we would like to create something with a large number of people. One person deals with one part of the contract, another person thinks of some matters which do not appear in the contract, but maybe might affect the relationship between the parties if things go south. And we're trying to work in a group, and what you are trying to achieve is an outcome that needs to be, say, homogeneous, needs to be something that can be used by a third party with the absolute quality and reflects something as if it was done by a single person. but a single person that has a lot of skills, because it is an aggregate of the individual thinking of a very large group of individuals who were behind that work project. Having that ability that you were describing, Carmen, of communicating well with others, that's something that first, it will be easy to detect during the job application process, because you'll probably get interviews. Your interviewers will ask you to explain how you solve problems. It might be, this happens in law firms, that you will have to solve cases in a team situation, even if it's a mock situation, but you'll probably have to solve cases, and they will assess that. And having had this experience and having empathized with the situation of other people in terms of understanding what you're trying to convey to them, this I think is a great asset, and definitely helpful for your work and for your job later on.
Perfect. I think that Haile, you were about to say something before.
Yeah, so first of all, I fully agree, and most of my points are made in terms of the value of that cultural and emotional intelligence that comes, that's sort of the real meat of communication. We talk about communication as an important thing, but it's really about that. And in a much more globalized, international, complex world, it would be crucial. And understanding the things that you assume, the things that you do, almost naturally that come from your culture, your background, but actually they are very different in other places. And they influence how you think, who you communicate with, who you talk about, who you hire. And this is fundamentally linked to, some of the challenges of equity, diversity, and things like that are important. So having that awareness will, of course, give you an edge in the market in the future. I want to maybe, if there's time, to ask Ajda or Luke, if you were sort of to look into the future, in what way is, just one thing, in what way is the EUTOPIA a future university? It's a European university, but in what way is it a future university? Thank you.
I mean, I would like to hope that it is the future university in terms of kind of the model of utopia is kind of what we're looking at in the future as a university that allows kind of perfect mobility between not just European universities, but kind of then can be expanded onto other partner universities, and just allow students to kind of be able to go wherever they want to be able to carry out their studies, and it will be a kind of seamless experience. And I think that is probably quite aspirational and probably kind of very unlikely to happen, kind of where you can go wherever you want and it will be seamless. But I think utopia is a very, very good kind of stepping stone to exploring how it might work, how we might be able to explore kind of these different governance structures at different universities, how they fit together, and how we can kind of just allow students to flow between universities and really get kind of the international experience that they want to, and that will really help to develop them. So as I say, it is all kind of, this is probably quite a way in the future. A lot of work has yet to be done. But I think kind of what we're seeing with EUTOPIA so far, with development of kind of modules that are shared between universities and such like, I think we're definitely getting some of the way there, and it is very, very exciting.
I think that sorry for interrupting, but I think that we're a bit sort of short of time. We're almost out of time, but Ajda, please give your thoughts also on Haile's question.
Thank you. I'll try to be as quick as possible, but maybe for me the key word is transdisciplinarity, because I think that sometimes between students we complain a lot that formal education is very much one way, and that you only see the problem in placed in one discipline. But I think non-formal educational capabilities that are being opened through projects such as EUTOPIA enable us the wider spectrum of looking at an issue that we've been represented or presented in the discipline we're studying only in one way. So that's the future for me, I think, that spectrum being open to students.
Thank you so much. I think those will be pretty much the final remarks if we're supposed to keep the time frame. So I want to end this session by thanking you all a lot for participating. I think that you were able to cover a lot of ground in this very complex question in a very short amount of time, and I think that's was very useful. And I was trying to sum up some of the thoughts that you put forward, and you have mentioned a lot of things around soft skills, like an umbrella of soft skills and different things underneath as an added value of being a part of a network. And of course, we haven't touched that much about sort of the academics of it, but that might be natural. And I think that also when I think it was Heidi who said in the beginning that networks are a lot about people and connecting people, and I think that's sort of also a beautiful thing about the network context. So by those words, I want to end this session, but I also want to remind you, of course, that the EUTOPIA Week goes on, and that we have another interesting session just in 30 minutes with the career ambassadors at 12:30. So if you have the time, or make the time, so please join that session, and thank you for now, and thank you so much for participating into the panel, and thank you for listening in.